online private high schools. So we're not just talking about schools during lockdowns or pandemics or anything like that, where they're like forced into doing these things because they got no other choice. This is by choice. We're actually talking about physical schools who are pushing for this. So, for example, we've got Hailbury coming out of one of Victoria's first private online schools. And for them, they've actually opened up expressions of interest for the schooling year in 2023. Now, the interesting part, which I don't know if you know, Charlie, in 2021, Hailbury actually produced some of the highest VCE results. They actually had 8 students achieve a 99.95, and 51% of their students finished in the top 10 across Australia.
And that's why everyone was in lockdown, right? That's why they are remote.
2021.
Learning.
Yep, in lockdown. So talk about a school that's got street cred on being able to be successful at this. Like, does this mean that we've just mastered online learning, or is this something more?
This is such a powerful topic. So many layers to this. I'm going to go with the first thing is that if I, as you know, let's pretend Hailbury is a private school. It's a business.
Yep.
If I had those types of results from lockdown and when people couldn't go to the school, I would be doing the same thing.
First mover advantage. Yeah, results to back it too.
We've got a system to execute remote learning better than everyone else. We've got the ATAR results to prove it. This is a way for them to expand into markets interstate, regionally, like potentially globally, although I don't know if the Australian schooling system has much value overseas. But in the example, I still look at that and go, what an expansionary move for them.
Huge.
Where they don't need to build more buildings. Like this is like, think of the margin expansion on this if you suddenly don't have to provide like physical room on a premise to support that as a business.
Yep.
So from my point of view, I'm giving this like, this is Charlie's big tick of approval. This is the stuff I think people should be looking for going forward. This is the post-COVID or post-pandemic game plan, which is going to see some businesses absolutely crush it over the next 5-10 years.
Yeah, because there's so many businesses that have to support that, right? Like when I first started reading about this, I immediately thought through, okay, what's the impact for this? So I remember at high school, like I had to put my names down and it's like, do you remember doing like preferences? Like I want to do graphics and I want to do business and I want to do this. And then like not everybody gets their preference and so they can't get into that class because there's too many students in that class and all those kind of things. It's like, hang on, wait, there's no limits to classrooms. Like you can have, if 1,000 kids want to do graphic design, 1,000 kids can do a graphic design. But in addition to that, I get to have the best people teach me these things as well. I'm like, oh, no way. So now the breadth of what you can offer is greater because my school didn't have the greatest facilities. It didn't have all of the facilities, I would say, which means there were some things that we just didn't have on offer. We didn't have certain classes that other schools had. And I'm like, oh, no way. I would have preferred some of those coding classes or some of those other classes that other schools had, but I didn't have that opportunity. So now that's open to me. I'm just like, from a business owner's perspective, I'm like, this is fantastic to support schools through this change. But even for you as a parent, I'm assuming that looking at Jack going, you'll be guilty. I know exactly how I'm going to play this one.
Let's make that example a little bit wider. So let's say you live regionally. Let's pick somewhere like
Geelong. Go to Geelong.
Okay, Geelong's still pretty big. I want to go more regionally. Let's go like Torquay then, or Lawn.
Or Bendigo or something.
Bendigo's massive. Yeah, we need a smaller city. We're going to go like Lawn. It's a coastal town. Yeah. I imagine there's a high school there at the very minimum, but it's like it's not going to be Hailbury. And I'll laugh if there is actually a Hailbury equivalent there. I don't have any research.
Well, I'll pretend like there's not. There's fine.
That's exactly what I need. Pretend. I like it. Now, let's say your kid is very interested in coding. They're computer science orientated and maths orientated, but for whatever reason, the school in the local area doesn't have the best teacher at that or the facilities to support that.
Yep.
Now, the options previously were like boarding schools, which separate children from the home and all the rest of it, where now the opportunity to have your child educated in something like a Hailbury, where they have the best teacher of coding and the right curriculum or whatever goes into it. I look at that and go, well, this is going to shape economies differently.
Yep.
Because now you've got people in regional towns acquiring skill sets that previously weren't accessible to them. Maybe the parents couldn't afford boarding school. Or so the skill sets that are going to become available to people at volume from the best teachers, I think is such a powerful thing here. I love that this is happening.
Yeah, and it's going to drive so much more pressure towards regional, which I know we've spoken about this a lot, of just going, well, how great would it be if there were like these satellite sort of tech cities and all these things that people can push out to. And we're already seeing it a little bit happen. But then you've actually got these schools, like, so wealthy people don't have to sort of congregate around like these CBDs just to get out, or to these like schools just to get access to them, to say, hey, do I have the right postcode? Am I on the right side of the street just so my child can go to that school? It's like, well, no, like you have that availability now wherever you are.
What if you're a parent and you've bought into one of these school zones and an opportunity's come up to start a new business regionally or another location? Doesn't even have to be regionally. You're no longer locked into like the idea of, I don't really want to have my kids travel to school an hour every day back and forth. You know, like there's all these interesting changes of like freedom of mobility, I think is really cool here.
Yeah. And from a wealth perspective, do you see any big sort of opportunities for Australian business owners in this space, or even for like wealth creation around this? Like, do you see any sort of macro impacts or anything like that outside of just the opportunity for children?
I thought you'd never ask.
I have to ask.
All right, you ready? I've been thinking about this a lot, and I'll tell you why. I don't know if you saw the news this week. All the teachers went on strike.
Yep.
Wanting bigger pay rises. And they're like, okay, well, you know, you've offered us 3%. We want way more than that. We're worth more than that. I'm not disputing that. I'm not disputing that teachers in the current way of teaching probably deserve more. But I'm looking at this right now and I'm going, you guys don't see what's coming.
Yep.
So the way teachers are teaching now is Blockbuster, is Kodak. And what we're actually going to see is that these online high schools, or way they're going about it, are the Netflix, are the digital camera. And what is about to happen is the best teachers are about to get paid really well to teach in these schools so that they can attract the most students for online learning. And I think a lot of schools are going to struggle because, again, using our example, if you're in Lawn and the high school you've got here has got C-grade teachers that don't really care and aren't paid well and complaining, and just negative people overall, and then you've got no one wants to go to that school, they all want to go do online learning, well, what happens to the school?
Yep.
So that, I think there's going to be really, really interesting disinflationary, and I know we talk about inflation a lot. We're going to talk about disinflation, where I think over the next 10 years, we're going to need less schools, less teachers. There's going to be less cars on the road between 9 and 3. Yeah, it's going to shift it all. It's going to massively shift the requirements on learning in a really big way.
And I see the revenue that you can create from a infinitely scalable, to an extent, I'll say infinitely scalable, because you still need to support the kids and do all that kind of stuff. But just think about the salaries. Like if the number one cost was the salaries and then the technology to support the online school as opposed to the buildings and maintenance and all that kind of stuff, just think about the draw card that you have for the greatest talent, because that is your biggest expense, is the greatest talent. But then in actual fact, the barrier for a family to remove their child from one school and move them into another school like is so small. It's just like, okay, we're just going to move from here to here, which means that people will go to the ones who are winning, like a Hailbury getting like 8 students with 99.95. It's like, well, I'm going to go where that is. But then that's going to drive that market up too. And so it's really interesting that I agree that the schools are probably going to decrease, teaching will decrease, but the ones who are very good at doing this delivery and very good at specializing in whatever sort of thing they're teaching in, they will do very well out of this, because there's a demand. There will need to be a demand. It's like, oh, your students do really, 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 really well. Come over here, because it's almost like a celebrity. You're the draw card that's going to pull the students in, right? So it's almost like building an A-class team of just these great people.
Absolutely. I'm very excited by this. Can I make a prediction or speculation?
Let's do it.
I actually feel what's going to come out of this from a business front is, you know how we have like co-working for like where we work?
Yep.
I think WeWork type facilities in towns for kids to go to go to their remote school will become a thing.
I spoke to somebody about this exact thing about a year ago, and what it was a testing facility for students. And so the students will come in. So essentially a school will rent this place out, and they have kind of, I don't want to say babysitters, but I call them babysitters, which are just people who are there to make sure that you're on the computer, you're not distracted, and you're kind of doing the thing. And if you really have like a rudimentary question that like, how can I do this? How can I log in here? Blah, blah, blah. They're there to help. And that was it. It was like this, It was like going to, what is it, a commissary, which is like a ghost kitchen, right? You go, cool, I want to borrow it from these times, walk in, cook a meal, happy days. And so I agree, like those co-working spaces, which just have people there sort of making sure everyone's tech set up and their videos set up and all those kind of things. I agree. And I already know that some of them are starting to exist out of necessity during COVID. I don't know where they're at now, but you're right. If this thing continues to barrel forwards, it's like, cool, let's go and send our kids to these locations that then a heap of children are across multiple schools, right? Like it's almost school agnostic, which I think is fantastic.
I'll throw it out there as well, business opportunities. I think tutoring is going to become bigger.
Massive.
Yeah. So I think if you're in the tutoring industry or supporting kids with online learning, that's going to become a thing. I'm not sure this is going to roll out as much in primary schools because I think that that's a little bit different, but the high school front, particularly in higher education front, I can just see more and more of this coming through.
Hey, fellow business owner, if this topic and value-packed short video has resonated with you at all, and you want to dive deeper into being a full stack business owner, check out the full episode by clicking the link on your screen or in the description right now.